Hello, I'm Sandy Burnett, and it's my great pleasure to be joined today by David Juritz, award-winning violin soloist, recording artist, festival director, and mastermind behind this imaginative new take on the Goldberg Variations by Johann Sebastian Bach. David, it's great to have your company.
Well, thanks, Sandy. I've been working on this project for the last 3 years or so it's wonderful to finally have something to talk to people about.
Tell me a bit about the Goldbergs first. I mean, we call them the Goldberg Variations. It had an official title in German, which was much longer, but how come the name Goldberg got attached to this set of variations?
That probably comes from Bach's first biographer, Forkel, who was writing in the very early 1800s. Goldberg was a really brilliant young musician. He'd been brought to Leipzig by the Count Kaiserlink, the Russian ambassador. Forkel tells how the Count was a chronic insomniac and had asked Bach to write some soothing music for him to listen to in the small hours of the night. Poor old Goldberg's job was to spend his nights sat at a harpsichord playing through the night to soothe him back to sleep. There's no actual evidence of any kind of commission. Bach didn't mention either the Count or Goldberg on the title page of the first edition, which probably means that he didn't actually associate the piece directly with either of them. It's likely that Goldberg did play the music for the Count, but Bach's writing almost certainly wasn't only so that the Count could get a good night's sleep.
Yes, because Bach always had a bigger purpose in all of his compositions, didn't he? He was a very systematic composer. So the Goldberg Variations probably fitted into some larger plan of his, didn't they?
He'd written variations before. The famous Chaconne for solo violin, of course, is an extended set of continuous variations, and there were the chorale variations for the organ as well. But he doesn't seem to have been quite as interested in variations as some of his contemporaries, although there's a theory that he might have been inspired by two of them in particular.
For the next part of our talk, I'd like to hand the baton to you, really, because I know that you've chosen some excerpts from your recording. We're not going to hear the aria and the 30 variations in the aria again right now, but you've just selected a few moments. So over to you. What are we going to hear first and why?
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. We've already heard a little bit of the aria. Why don't we turn to variation 1? Bach does something really incredible in those first 4 bars. He used numbers in his music a lot. This was very popular in Germany at the time. They used to use what was called a number alphabet. So you could say that A equaled 1, B equaled 2, C equaled 3, and so forward. Bach certainly wasn't the first person to do that. Johannes Pachelbel, he of the canon fame, had published a Hexacordium Apollinis in 1699, and the foreword to that publication goes into quite a bit of detail about this process, which was called the gematria. You could say, take your name and take a motto that you particularly liked. Then you would go through all the letters and you would calculate the value of each. And if the number of your name and the sum of the numbers in the motto added up together, you could then claim there was a connection between the two of them. As it happens, the letters of Johannes Pachelbel actually add up to 666, which was slightly unfortunate. Bach, B equals 2A1, C equals 3, and H adds up to 14. J.S. Bach, using Bach's German alphabet, adds up to 41. And so you've got this neat 1-4-4-1 symmetry going on there. Bach uses this in his music an awful lot. You'd never know it by just listening to the music, but if you look for it, it's there. In the first 4 bars of Variation 1, he uses both his 2 numbers. On the top line, we have 41 notes over 4 bars, and then on the bottom line, there's a 7-note pattern in each bar. 7 times 2 equals 14, and 14 times 2 equals 28, which is what's known as a perfect number, which we haven't got time to go into now. But let's just have a quick listen to those first 4 bars again.
So that music flows along so naturally, doesn't it? But to the naked ear, so to speak, we're not aware that there's such clever number systems going on.
It's incredible. Every third variation is a canon, so from Variation 3 up until Variation 27, 9 canons. The first canon, the second voice copies the first voice exactly.
That's the canon thing, isn't it? It's an exact repeat.
Yeah, and
sometimes at the same pitch and sometimes at a different pitch, yeah.
The next canon is Variation 6. This being Bach, he's obviously not going to keep it simple. What he does now is he starts the second voice 1 note higher than the first voice, which is the interval of a second. And then that pattern continues in the third canon. He starts 3 notes away, except instead of going 3 notes high, he goes 3 notes lower. But when you get to the 4th and 5th canons, there's a potential problem with these. If you have 2 voices moving together in 4ths or 5ths, you have to be very, very careful. Otherwise, you get what's called consecutive or parallel 5ths. This is a huge contrapuntal no-no. There's a big rule about it, because if you use consecutive 5ths, it sounds terrible. But Bach gets around this in a very clever way. Listen to what he does here.
So the second voice comes in upside down, following the first. And all the time we've got a free third voice, which is just knitting everything together and making it sound even more musical. I think that's how it works.
It was important that the instruments were actually at the exact pitch that Bach had written them at, which means the guitar's often playing incredibly high. But I had a virtuoso guitarist, for one thing, and another thing was he's a completely unflappable Aussie, so he never blinked at any of the challenges I threw at him. If you want to hear an example of wonderful guitar playing, have a listen to Variation 25, the Black Pearl.
violin and the cello are pizzicatoing to match the guitar texture. It must be very interesting to think of the restrictions, as it were, of playing this work in its original form on the keyboard. A keyboard with 2 manuals, though.
Well,
and you don't want to go completely bananas, do you, in terms of arranging it?
what I tried to do was to sort of stay true to the sense of where Bach was writing for 2 keyboards or 1. And actually, it really comes across in Variation 29. 29 is another important number for Bach. It's actually the sum of 3 very important letters to a lot of Baroque composers, S, D, G, Soli Deo Gloria, which means to glory to God alone. Now, Bach used to add this to a lot of the end of his music. Handel used it as well. But for Bach, it was special because you can also arrive at 29 by adding up the letters J, S, B. So you get a parallel sense between glory to God and Johann Sebastian Bach. A slightly better result than poor Pachelbel there.
So, going back to the motivation of why Bach wrote this work, what are the other possibilities? Paint the scene for us a bit here.
First of all, it's a very, very personal piece of music to Bach. The way he puts 14 and 41 into that music all over the place, that it's like he's sort of celebrating being Bach. And I'm pretty sure that even the date of publication, 1741, wasn't a complete coincidence. Another important inspiration for him was his relationship with 2 composers, both of whom he really idolized. Buxtehude, the preeminent organ virtuoso in Bach's youth, and then there's Bach's exact contemporary, George Friedrich Handel. The pianist Jeremy Denk has put forward the argument that the final variation of Goldberg's Variation 30, the quodlibet, actually has a hidden message for Handel.
So a quodlibet, which you could translate as whatever you want, what does that mean for a composer like Bach? And what was it, an actual musical form?
Probably more of a musical game than a form. It was a kind of mashup where you could find another song which actually fitted well with the music that was going on. The Bach family used to play this when they met up. And in the quodlibet, Bach takes 2 popular songs. One of the songs was used by the great Dietrich Buxtehude as the theme for a really brilliant set of variations he wrote called La Capriciosa. So that's a tribute to Buxtehude there. Bach was 20 years old. He went to Lübeck to spend 3 or 4 months with Buxtehude. And it's likely that he would have met Handel there. We don't have any record of it, but it's certainly highly possible. Handel at that stage was a rising young star in the opera. Buxtehude used to organize these huge concerts which were famous all over Germany at the time. And it's very likely that Handel would have actually been taking part in those concerts, so they could very well have met up there. We move on 15 years. By now, they're both established composers, and at this point, Bach seems very keen to meet Handel, but Handel seems very keen not to meet Bach. In 1719, Handel had travelled back to Halle from London, and Bach happened to be in Halle at the same time. Bach was very excited, wrote to Handel, said, "I'm going to come and see you tomorrow." Arrived the next day to discover that Handel had left the day before. Then in 1730, Handel was on another extended visit. Bach sent one of his sons to invite Handel to come and stay with him in Leipzig. Handel turned him down flat, said he was too busy. Now, we've no idea why Handel might have been trying to avoid Bach. It's just possible that he might have been worried that the minute the two of them were in the same room, somebody would have wanted to have a competition between them. It was the kind of thing they used to do. They loved to compare performers, and Handel had already sort of scored a draw against Scarlatti in Rome in the early 1700s. Possibly he didn't fancy his chances against Bach.
Because that's the one thing that Bach was famous for in his day, wasn't it? As being a brilliant organ virtuoso rather than a composer.
Absolutely. Bach was a brilliant virtuoso, and he was also a virtuoso who was capable of holding a grudge. That second refusal must have really stung Bach.
So this is your starting point behind the idea that the quadlibet may have been something to do with Handel and Bach.
So we move on 3 years, and Handel produces a chaconne and 62 variations. By Handel standards, they're distinctly workmanlike. Round about that time, Bach must have started on his Goldberg Variations. He chooses exactly the same harmonic progression, but what Bach does, in order to give himself a head start, is he adds another 24 bars on with lots of sort of harmonic variation in it, so he's got really great material to work with. We'll get back to the quadlibet. You'll have to excuse my singing. I haven't done my vocal warm-up yet, but the words for the first song go, Ich bin so lang nicht bei dir gewesen. Sorry, my German's not much better than my singing either, but that translates as, it's been so long since I've been together with you, and it goes on, fly away, fly away. The second song is Kraut und Rüben haben mich vertrieben. Sorry, that's even worse, isn't it? That one translates as cabbages and beets have driven me away. If you'd given me more meat, I would have stayed. That's obviously a reference to the digestive drawbacks of a diet too rich in root vegetables. And if we imagine Buxtehude and Handel listening to the Goldberg Variations together, Buxtehude would have heard the song that he used as his theme, and he would have recognised it as it is, as a tribute to him. He would have been absolutely delighted. Handel, on the other hand, would have heard a clear reference to a windbag who ran away. So two messages for two composers there, and I think, well, that's what makes Bach such a master of counterpoint.
So go back to your own interpretation and your own recording. What's the plan? Tell me about the release date for the recording and things after that.
Well, last summer, Craig Ogden, Tim Hugh, and myself went down to the wonderful Wyastone Concert Hall and recorded it for Nimbus. So that's coming out on 2nd of April. And obviously over the last year with the lockdown, we haven't been able to do any of the performances we'd planned, but we're hoping we'll be able to get out there with it in the very, very near future.
So the release date for the disc is the 2nd of April. I think you mentioned that, but just to remind, and the score and parts are available from Nimbus as well, Nimbus Music Publishing. So Nimbus is the go-to sort of address, for both of those things. Well, David, it's always a great pleasure to talk Bach with you. You've got so many fascinating ideas and your playing is absolutely wonderful. So it's great to hear the insights that you've brought into the Goldberg Variations, both verbally and, of course, musically. So, and a reminder, you've been joined by Craig Ogden and Tim Hugh to make this version for violin, guitar and cello. It's available on Nimbus. So good luck with everything, David. It's been great as ever to have your company. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks so much, Sandy. Thanks.